I was laid off at 51, 19 years at the same company, hundreds of coworkers. And when I was laid off, not one of them called or text. Not one. I kept checking my phone. You know how you do. You tell yourself you're not expecting anything, but every few minutes, you're still looking at the screen. So, yeah, nothing. And maybe you didn't get laid off. Maybe you chose to walk out the door. Maybe you hit your number and finally said enough. But I'm betting the result felt the same. You looked around and realized the people you thought were your friends were just the building. You see, sitting there that morning, I had to face something that I've been avoiding for a long time. And that is, those weren't friends. Those were just colleagues. And there's a difference. But here's the part that surprised me. The longer I sat with it, the less angry I became because eventually I had to ask myself a much harder question. And that is, if one of them had been laid off, would I have called them? And that's when I started thinking about what we call friendship. Because most work friendships are built on proximity. You didn't choose those people, they didn't choose you. You probably were assigned to the same building, the same floor, the same meeting, the same lunch break. And over time, it starts to feel like friendship. I know because I've lived that way for many years. And this doesn't just happen when you get laid off. It happens when you retire at 65 after a great career. It happens when you leave on your own terms. The moment the building stops being the reason you see each other, the relationship reveals itself. Now, I was an assistant vice president for a major bank, big building, big title, lots of people around me every day. And if you had asked me back then whether I had friendships or friends, I would say yes, absolutely. But after the layoff, I started counting. Not LinkedIn connections, not people from the chat group, not people who knew my job title, but people who actually knew me. People who knew what worried me, what mattered to me, what I was afraid of. And I got two. Maybe, and honestly, I wasn't even sure about one of them. Have you ever realized something about your life and immediately started rewriting your own history? Because that's what I was doing. I wasn't asking whether they were real friends. I was asking whether I had actually invested enough to create a real friendship in the first place. And that's a much harder question. But the truth is, the layoff wasn't the first time life handed me that lesson. A few years earlier, when I was diagnosed with leukemia, and I still remember hearing the diagnosis. You hear a word like leukemia, and suddenly your calendar doesn't matter anymore. Your title doesn't matter. Your retirement account doesn't matter. Everything gets very simple very fast. You start thinking about who's going to stand beside you. And here's what I learned. Most people don't know what to say when something serious happens. They say nothing. I remember telling people and then waiting. Not because I needed sympathy, just because I expected a response, a text, a phone call, anything. And some of the people that I was certain would reach out never did. Have you ever had that happen? The people you're absolutely sure will be there and then silence. What's funny is the opposite happened. The Some people I barely expected to hear from, they checked in. A simple message. How are you doing? And that's all. But in moment like that, those four words carry a lot of weight. I'm reminded of a verse that says, "A friend loves at all times." You see, when life gets hard, that's when you find out who keeps showing up. And looking back now, I don't see the diagnosis as just a health crisis. I see it as a filter. It stripped away assumptions. It showed me who was real. Not perfect, not heroic, just real. And it doesn't have to be a cancer diagnosis. For some people, it's a divorce, a move, an injury, a retirement, any moment where life gets real and everything suddenly gets quiet. Everyone gets quiet. And that's your filter. That's when you find out who's actually there. Now, the second filtering came a few years later. The layoff came along and finished the filtering for me. All right, so now let's talk about numbers because this channel is still about real life, real decision, and real numbers. Right now, my social circle is about 3 people deep, 2 family members, 1 lifelong friend. That's basically it. And here's the strange thing I spent years thinking that that was a problem. But now I think maybe that was one of the best things that ever happened to me. You see, when I was working in the office, I was spending $100 to $200 a month on what I now call social maintenance, happy hours, work lunches, events, birthday collections, after work gatherings. Things I said yes to because I thought I was supposed to. And maybe you've done that too. You get home and you think, why did I even go to that? I wasn't building meaningful relationships. I was just maintaining membership. The cost was around $2,000 a year. And here's the part that hit me. The day I got laid off, all of it disappeared. The spending, the invitations, the obligations, the relationships, gone. That's when I realized I wasn't investing in friendships. I was paying for access to a social environment. And there's a difference. And when that spending stopped, the money just went into my emergency fund instead. But the biggest benefit wasn't financial, it was peace. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't performing a version of myself. I could just be me. And honestly, I've always been kind of weird. I enjoy spreadsheets, I enjoy budgeting, I enjoy quiet mornings. Retirement didn't turn me into that person. Retirement finally gave me permission to stop pretending I wasn't. And here's a question for you. When was the last time you counted your real friends? Not followers, not subscribers, not contacts, not coworkers, real friends. You see, the people are real, the people who notice when you disappear for a week, the people who would answer the phone, the people who would show up. I counted mine after the diagnosis. I counted again after the layoff, and the number was small both times. But here's the surprise. I expected the realization to make me feel abandoned, but instead, it made me feel relieved because I finally stopped chasing a number. Do you know what I mean? If you do, let me know in the comments. Now, we're taught that a bigger circle, a bigger social circle automatically means better, more invitations, more activity, more people, more events, more everything. But nobody ever asks whether those relationships are actually making your life better. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Lonely is wanting connection and not having it. Alone is choosing solitude and being perfectly content. I am alone quite often. I am not lonely. And maybe those aren't the same thing for you. Everyone seems to be chasing a number. Maybe your number is 10, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 2. The point isn't the number. The point is knowing what enough looks like for you. So I'm curious about your experience. Did retirement, a health scare, a layoff, or some other life event change how you see friendship? Let me know in the comments. I read every one of them. Now, the people who didn't call after the layoff, I don't hold it against them. The people who disappeared after the leukemia diagnosis, I don't hold that against them either. You see, life gets busy and people have their own struggles to deal with. And honestly, I've probably been that person in someone else's story. But what I gained from those experiences wasn't resentment, it was clarity. I know who's real, I know who I can count on. And maybe most importantly, I know what enough looks like for me. I thought having a lot of people around me meant I was connected, but it didn't. It just meant that I was surrounded. And today, my circle is small, smaller than most people would probably expect. But when I look at those few people, I know exactly where I stand. And there's something incredibly peaceful about that. I spent many years thinking I needed more friends. Turns out I only needed two, and two was enough. It took me a long time to learn that enough isn't just a financial number. Sometimes enough is a quiet life, few people who truly care about you, and the peace that comes from knowing exactly who they are. Life has a way of stripping away things that are temporary. And if you're willing to pay attention, what's left behind is often the part that matters most. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.